Mr. Justin Case. Next to him is Mrs. Connie Joseph Louis, our financial analyst. Another member of the tariff review team is Mr. Jason Timothy, the projects officer. He's at the back, as well as our tariff review consultant, Mrs. Lamis Al-Junaidai. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of the DOMLEC General Manager, Mr. Sinak, DOMLEC staff. I see the president of the Dominica Manufacturers Association, a rep of the DAIC, stakeholders, the media, Emonews Live, and all our listeners via Emonews. Good morning. So, why are you here? The rate review is about how much you pay for essential services like electricity. It's the process that decides if rates go up, if they go down, or if they remain the same. As a stakeholder, whether you are an entrepreneur, a consumer, a decision maker, or just part of the community, you are directly affected. This is why the IRC has been giving stakeholders for the past year an opportunity to be a part of the process, buy into the process, because at the end of it all, we will all be affected. Hence this presentation here this morning on the IRC's modernized rate structure for DOMLEC. At this morning's activity, you will learn about the key elements of the rate setting process, guiding principles applied in reducing the base tariff, and efforts undertaken to modernize DOMLEC's tariff structure. Of course, this event is being held ahead of the completion and implementation of new rates for Dominica. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Mr. Justin Case to do his presentation. Mr. Justin Case, as you heard, is the Executive Director of the IRC. And I'd now like to welcome him to the mic to present.
Thank you. Thank you, Iduna. Good morning, everyone. To our participants who are present in person, as well as those online, locally, and internationally in various countries. I'd like to extend thank you all for joining us today. As Idona has already introduced, I'm Mr. Case, of the Executive Director of the IRC. I'm pleased to welcome you to this important presentation on the proposed tariff structure for our local electricity utility, i.e. DOMLEC. As we all know, energy is a critical part of our daily lives, powering our homes, our businesses, and our communities. Ensuring that our tariff system is fair, transparent, and sustainable is essential to meeting both the current and future energy needs of our region. Today we stand at a pivotal moment. With rising energy demands, growth of renewable energy sources, and evolving consumer behavior. Our existing tariff structure, therefore, needs to adapt. This new framework is designed not only to reflect the true cost of energy, but also to promote energy efficiency, equity among customer classes, and long-term financial stability for our utility services. During this session, we will walk you through the key changes in the new tariff structure, the rationale behind those changes, and what they mean for you, the customers, partners, and stakeholders. We'll also outline how we intend to implement these changes smoothly and answer any questions that you may have. Our goal is to ensure that this transition is as informed, inclusive, and transparent as possible. So without any further ado, we will go to the presentation. Just for everyone's education, the IRC was created or is a creature of the Act of Parliament of number 10 of 2006. Okay? Part 4 of the Act specifically addresses Part 4 of the Act specifically addresses tariffs and guides the process of tariff setting. In order to ensure that the tariff process or the process of tariff setting is done properly, an additional document, which is referred to as a decision document, was created with regulatory guidelines that permits the IRC to follow best practice methodologies in the process of reviewing the tariff. Next slide. Okay, the legal background is basically defined by 3 sections within the Act. Section 19, Section 18, Section 19, and other sections within the Act includes procedure for setting tariff review, which includes sections 23 and 24. We wouldn't go into detail on those sections at this point in time, as the Act is an online document and can be downloaded and this section as required. All right, so the public and other stakeholders will want to know that the Commission's approach to regulation, okay, basically has to do with balancing the interests of the consumers and investors, as well as achieving efficient, responsive economical service in an environment where the rights of all stakeholders are preserved. However, the Commission cannot guarantee a rate of return just on what investors may want. Okay, we have to follow the necessary processes and methodologies, and through effective and efficient operational practices and continuous efficiency improvement, which will have the opportunity to achieve the desired rate of return during any tariff period. Right? Okay, we don't really address that. So these are basically the guiding objectives of our approach to tariff setting. The rate making process. Now this is a flowchart of basically the steps that are taken in arriving at the rates. I will not be going into endless detail on that, but it has been just provided for reference purposes. And the presentation will be shared so you can have a better look at it. At this moment, I'd like to welcome Mrs. Connie Joseph Louis, who is our financial analyst, to explain the key parameters and how they fed into the derivation of the rate.
Good morning, Connie Joseph Louis. So I'm just going to provide an overview of what the IRC undertook when we went into the tariff process. So the critical parameters included the depreciation study, the weighted average cost of capital, what we call the rate of return, the revenue requirement and the rate base, and the utility 5 years investment plan. So the purpose of the depreciation studies is to determine the appropriate depreciation rate that reflects the actual service life and remaining life of the utilities asset. These rates are critical in calculating how much of the capital investment should be recovered from customers during any tariff period. So in November 2022, DOMLEC submitted its application for depreciation study to the Commission for review. The IRC, of course, convened a thorough review of the data set that was submitted to the Commission. The Commission proposed the remaining useful life for calculating depreciation. The Commission considered that the remaining useful life would provide the best estimate for calculating the depreciation, as the whole life method could lead to an overestimation of the depreciation amount. Following discussion between DOMLEC and the IRC, both parties agreed to that the proposed remaining useful life be applied to DOMLEC existing fixed assets for the new tariff period. In evaluating the fixed assets, we used DOMLEC's data, of course, and that was based on financial information provided as at year-end 2021. Following the discussion, to be transparent, we always undergo a public consultation where we met with stakeholders. So we met with stakeholders, we provide them with a synopsis of all our findings. DOMLEC themselves spoke and present their feedback with their consultant. IRC, of course, and its consultant also present to the stakeholders the work calculated on the depreciation study. So following stakeholders' engagement, the final decision on the depreciation policy was issued in April of 2024. Another leg that is considered into the tariff process is a word that we use all the time. We call it the weighted average cost of capital. It's a big word, but in simple terms, it just represents the rate of return to be applied on DOMLEC fixed assets. So the rate of return is based on the principle that utilities should be allowed a fair return on their rate base. That is the value of the assets invested in the company, which was financed through debt or equity. The rate of return, as I said, is the WACC, is what the company expects to pay to all its capital providers. And the capital providers are debt holders, equity holders, and sometimes you may have preference shareholders to finance its assets. It represents the company's cost of financing, and it is used in the financial model. So we will not go into the calculation of the weighted average cost of capital. But as I said, the key components of the weighted average cost of capital, it factors a percentage of debt against the cost of debt, and a percentage of the cost of equity against the cost of equity, a percentage of the preference stocks against the percentage of the stocks, preference stocks, if given. So it also includes a capital structure. So the capital structure are the weights of each source of finance, and which we include debt and equity that is used to fund the company's operation. The cost of debt consists of the effective interest rate on the utility's current long-term borrowing. So it's a straightforward figure that is used based on the financing option in terms of interest rates on your long-term debt. And the cost of equity is a more in-depth calculation. And the cost of equity is the compensation investors receive for owning the assets and bearing the risk associated with investing in the company. So the cost of equity is critical in determining the rate of return in the tariff process. In our tariff decision document, in determining the cost of equity, our tariff decision document requires us to use the capital asset pricing model, and which we call CAPED, and it is used to calculate the cost of equity, that is the return that investors receive for investing in the utilities assets. In June 2023, DOMLEC submitted its application for approval of the weighted average cost to the IRC for consideration. Again, we held collaborative discussion with DOMLEC. We conducted a comprehensive review of the data shared, and then the Commission again agreed to a proposed weighted average cost of capital, which we took over to our our stakeholders during the stakeholders engagement. So we again had a consultative process where we present our findings. DOMLEC again presents its finding on the proposed weighted average cost of capital, or the rate of return to be applied to the rate base. That final decision was issued in January of 2025. Another process is the revenue requirement. And the revenue requirement is the total amount of money that a utility needs to collect from customers through rates to cover the cost of operation and to allow the utility to earn a reasonable return on the investment. The revenue requirement ensures that the utility remains financially viable while protecting the interests of shareholders and other stakeholders, and ensuring that the rates are not excessive. Key components in deriving the revenue requirement was considered, and that include the utilities operating expenses, which is the daily operating cost, the cost of labor, the cost of operating costs, administrative costs, finance costs, fuel costs, etc. We also looked at, it also covers depreciation, taxes, and the rate of return to be applied on the weighted, on the rate base. In deriving the revenue requirement, we use a test year figure, which was 2023 financials, which looked at 6 months actual and 6 months projected values from the utility. In August 2024, DOMLEC submitted again its application for the revenue requirement to the Commission. Again, a thorough review and analysis of the data set was convened. Again, we held several meetings going back and forth between DOMLEC to determine what assets are considered as a regulated asset base. When we look at the term regulated asset base, it more or less represents the used and useful assets that will be used during the tariff period. So it more or less takes into consideration the plant in service, building, transmission assets, vehicles, furniture, substations, and other assets that the company has. It adjusts for accumulated depreciation. It adjusts for accumulated deferred tax. It adjusts for working capital and any other related costs associated in deriving the revenue requirement. Again, as we held our public consultation, we showed the step-by-step methodology that was used to derive the revenue requirement. The Commission convened. So the rate base, as I said, based on the total rate base value, we use again the actual and projected figure for 2023. And with that fixed asset or that rate base figure, we multiply that value by the rate of return, or the WACC, which I spoke about, to be applied to the rate base. Collaborative discussions again was held between DOMLEC and IRC. Again, for transparency, we went through consultative process where stakeholders gave their feedback, where we engaged stakeholders on the amount to be factored, why we disallowed certain items, why certain items are included, why certain items are considered used and useful. Following the collaborative discussion or stakeholder engagement, a final decision on the revenue requirement was issued in January 2025. Now we also looked at DOMLEC, the utilities 5 years investment plan. So in 2024, in August of 2024, the commission concluded its review of DOMLEC 5-year investment plan. DOMLEC again submitted its 5 years investment plan for the commission's consideration. The 5-year investment plan considered major capital investment projects that DOMLEC intend to undertake as part of its strategic objective. It looked at investment in generation assets, transmission assets, that the company, engineering assets that the company will utilize throughout the 5-year period. However, because we had a lot of back and forth going on, we looked at the most recent 5-year with 3-year period, which was data from 2025 to 2027, because part of 2022 and 2023 and 2024 actual were already taken into consideration, because because of the fact that the actual figure fitted it had passed already, we only consider the projected figure 2025, 2026 and 2027. Again, as part of our review, it was based on projects that are considered critical, and we also considered DOMLEC's implementation capability. So again, collaborative discussion was held for as to the reasonableness of the assets. We had back and forth again. DOMLEC were able to clarify the justification for each line item. We engaged into public consultation for the capital investment plan, and that was completed in 2024. Final decision on the document was issued in January of 2025. Now, the second leg of it is the tariff principle. So there are two basic models for the tariff structure which could be applied in Dominica's context. A tariff which include all the costs, including the cost of fuel, based on the projected cost of fuel over the tariff period, and a two-part tariff comprising of a non-fuel based rate and a fuel charge, which fully recover the cost of fuel subject to efficiency factored into the tariff model. The Commission has adopted number 2 and will allow 100% pass-through of fuel costs. Now, the guidelines for the tariff principle, as Mr. The ED said, it's highlighted or it is mandated as per the tariff decision document of the IRC. So I'm just going to discuss more or less what the tariff principle entails for the revenue requirement. So the revenue requirement for the base tariff factors a non-fuel component, which includes operating costs, maintenance costs, administrative costs, income tax, and all other expenses associated with the utility. It also includes a finance cost, that is the rate of return or the WACC which I spoke about multiplied by the rate base. Okay? And then, so the base rate revenue requirement looks at the operating costs, excluding fuel costs. It looks at the finance cost, which is the rate base multiplied by the rate of return or the WACC, and it also includes a fuel charge. In the current tariff structure, there is a fuel surcharge, but in the new structure, there will be a fuel charge. And the fuel charge is determined by the cost of imperial gallon of diesel fuel used at all DOMLEC generating stations during a calendar month registered by the meters. So that will be by the generating unit meters. It will also include the cost of imperial gallon of blending fuel oil used at all DOMLEC generation stations in Dominica during a calendar month registered by the meter. And it will also include the total amount paid for other sources of renewable energy from independent power producers or distributed generators using meter reading supplied to DOMLEC generation. And that figure, that value, is divided by the cost of energy sold for the month. Currently, as it is, DOMLEC does not have blended fuel. So in the model, it allows for imperial gallon of fuel used, blended fuel used, but blending fuel is not used currently. And it also factors renewable energy. So when geothermal energy comes on stream, of course, it's a form of renewable energy. It will be factored into as other form of energy. And that value will be divided by the cost of the energy sold. So in a nutshell, it will include of a fuel charge, as I explained, and a non-fuel charge, which factors your operating costs, which factors your rate of return applied to the rate base. So in terms of values, we have not yet completed the final leg of the tariff process. We are supposed to undertake consultation in the next few months as it relates to the cost of service study and the rate proposal, following which all the values will be presented. However, during the consultation process, all values were presented during the consultation process as it relates to the revenue requirement, as it relates to the rate base, as it relates to the operating costs, and as it relates to the WACC, which is the rate of return to be applied on the rate base. So that concludes my presentation, and I will hand over to you, Mr. Case, so he can continue his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. Okay, so following what Connie said, we will give a synopsis of the efforts that were undertaken to modernize the DOMLEC or the rate structure. All right, so as our regulatory document dictates, the tariff review period will be for every 3 years. So when we adopt a new rate, this will be effective for 3 years. We have taken the liberty, after much research, to introduce the time of use principle in rate charges for on-peak and off-peak periods. This will be applicable to residential, large commercial, and industrial hotel customer categories. For the domestic residential category, we have 2 options. We have the standard option and the TOU option. This will be elaborated upon as we go along in the presentation. And finally, we have the introduction of a small business category, which will include any non-domestic customer that utilizes 500 kilowatt hours per month or less. Next slide, please. Additional interventions. any customer that falls, how we define large is anybody that uses an excess of 500 kilowatt hours of energy in any month. For the categories of commercial, hotel, industrial, there's a maximum demand charge. This maximum demand charge replaces what was traditionally in the old rate structure, which was an installed capacity charge. Okay, so what that maximum charge is all about is that it is the maximum demand recorded by your meter in any one month over the period of a year. And one of the other interventions that the IRC has taken to get DOMLEC to operate a little more efficiently is the introduction of key performance indices, which is an area that we will deal with in another another presentation, to go into more details as to what these KPIs are when we have finally agreed with DOMLEC which ones will be applicable. All right, so what influenced the division of customer categories, existing customer categories, into subcategories? All right, as we know, it's a basic principle, very basic. A number can be divided into numerous quantities, lesser quantities. Okay, so it has to do with the division of a number, the divisibility of numbers. And so let's take, for example, 12. 12 can be divided into 6 plus 6. 12 can be divided into 3 fours, 4 threes, 6 twos, or 12 ones. Now, the more you divide a number, the lesser it becomes. So that's the basic principle that fed into the division of the categories into small and large, and furthermore into time of use. This principle is only constrained by the market size. So this takes us to economy of scales, whereby the bigger the market size, the greater you can divide the quantity into, and therefore lesser the number. Okay, so these are what influenced the new tariff structure in terms of breaking it up so that we could realize lower rates at the periods that it's applied to. Next slide. Okay, so in summary, the proposed new structure includes a domestic standard. So domestic customers using 150 kilowatts or less per month. Then you have the time of use, which domestic customers using more than 150 kilowatt hours per month. This area there still has to be streamlined further. When we get the final document from DOMLEC, we will know for sure what is agreed upon finally. For small business customers, non-domestic customers using 500 kilowatt hours or less per month, commercial large customers in the commercial category using more than 500 kilowatt hours per month, hotel customers using more than 500 kilowatt hours per month, as well as industrial customers using 500 kilowatt hours per month or more. High voltage customers, that's a specialized category for customers that require high voltage connections to their premises. These may include hotel customers or customers that operate a business where a quarry is utilized. And then we have street lighting. Street lighting is self-explanatory. Summary of interventions achieved. Cost control. This is tied to the presentation that Connie just gave. So we introduced an OPEX efficiency target, achieved a reduced depreciation amount, as well as a lower WACC compared for DOMLEC, and achieved a lower capex amount. Now you may wonder, how did we achieve a lower capex amount? This was done by identifying the projects that DOMLEC can do in any 1 year, reasonably do, and cap it at the achievable projects instead of just having 10 projects and you can only achieve 5. The depreciation amount, Connie explained that, and the OPEX efficiency target, that will be given in further detail when we are doing the actual consultation on the quantities for the rates. And strategic interventions achieved through tariff restructuring to achieve a fairer and more balanced pricing model. So that has to do specifically with the new structure that has been adopted so that we can achieve a more balanced pricing model and make it fairer to consumers. Further takeaways or comparison, the old rate structure had fixed charges for different categories compared to the new rate structure where customers are categorized more precisely for fairer balanced pricing. So you may wonder what we mean by that. The current market structure allows for large customers and small customers. So customers, based on the threshold that has been established, will be assigned to either small or large. Higher costs, second bullet point for old rate structure, higher costs due to uniform rate application. All right, so the difference between what has been adopted and the new rate structure is that we adopt a time of use pricing which encourages off-peak consumption, reducing strain on customers and the grid. What do we mean by off-peak consumption? Okay, so time of use has two categories. We have decided on two categories, a peak period, an on-peak period, and an off-peak period. The on-peak period will come with a specific period of time, which is usually during the day, when all businesses, as well as government offices and other entities are open and utilizing maximum power at that period. During that period, DOMLEC will have most of its generation online to meet the demand. Okay, so for that period, which is almost a 12-hour period, this is what we call on-peak. Later in the slide, we will let you know what the period is. So the off-peak period, similarly, is another 12-hour period whereby DOMLEC has to have less generation to meet a lower demand. That usually happens in the late evening to the early morning periods in any day. Okay, so the old rate structure, there was no differentiation for peak and off-peak usage. And also, the customer had greater exposure to fuel surcharge fluctuations. For the new rate structure for the customers that fall in commercial large, hotel large, as well as industrial large, there will be a maximum monthly demand which will replace the installed capacity, which was in the old structure. So the adjustments that were done, we hope, should result in ensuring fairer cost allocation and sustainability of the new rate structure. Next slide. All right, so now we'll take a little deep dive into what the different categories consist of for the new structure. So for the domestic standard, we have that will apply to all residential customers that are not under the TOU, which is the time of use category. There will be a customer charge, and the two-tier block will be retained. So charges you'll have for anyone utilizing less than 50 kilowatt hours will fall into block 1. And if you exceed 50 kilowatt hours, block 2 will kick in. There will be a fuel charge, which will be the same for all customers, as well as a purchase power charge, which will be applicable for all customers. And demand, reactive power, and standby charge, that is not applicable to the domestic category. Domestic TOU. It's available for residential customers. There's a customer charge. There will be peak and off-peak rates apply. So I must, to your information, let you know that the peak rate will be higher than the off-peak rates. As soon as we have the quantities to go into consultation, it will be shared with you. Fuel and purchased power charges, same for all customers. Demand, reactive power, and standby charges, none for that part of that category of domestic customers. Small business. As we saw earlier, small business applies to any business that utilizes less than 500 kilowatt hours in any month. Okay? There's a customer charge. There's a kilowatt hour charge, which will be one rate for all usage. And a fuel charge as well as a purchase power charge. Purchase power charges has to do with the export of the power that's exported from distributed renewable sources to the grid. As well as when the geothermal come, it will fall under the category of an IPP. So we refer to that as an IPP charge. Demand, reactive power, and standby charges, that is not applicable to small business. And there is no TOU for this category. The reason why is because of the smallness of the customer base that's within this category. Commercial large. Any business that falls in the commercial category that exceeds 500 kilowatt hours per month. There will be a customer charge. There will be TOU rates applying. And there will be fuel and purchase power charges. And commercial, that will also attract a demand charge. Reactive power charge will be applied if the demand exceeds 50 kilowatts and the power factor is less than 85%. This is the reactive power would be monitored through the DOMLEC AMI system, through their metering system. Hotel large, same thing like the previous one, but the rates, what will differentiate the hotel from the commercial is the rates that are applicable in that category. So as soon as we are ready for consultation, it will be shared with the public. Industrial large, same thing. What is the difference between the other two would be the rates. But the same basic structure is embraced for this category. Okay, so the TOU periods, which were mentioned earlier, the proposed times of use for peak period, on peak period during the weekdays would be 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Okay, similarly for off-peak periods, during the weekdays it will be from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. And for weekends, for the peak period will be from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. and on weekends it will be from 10 p.m. to 6 p.m. How does the TOU tariff benefit customers? This is a question that we are answering to make it more understandable to customers who are going to be, since it is we are introducing a new structure, we like customers to grasp how it really works. So the benefit to the customer for adopting TOU tariffs, basically speaking, to the savings that can be accrued. Now, basically what TOU does is that whether you utilize it effectively, remark this slide. Okay, so I don't know what's the technical issue, but basically what TOU does is that when you enter the TOU period, the customer automatically benefits from the rates applicable to that period. And so whether you take conscious intervention or not, the rates will apply when you enter that time period from on-peak to off-peak. The other advantage would be that you can, as a customer, can move certain of your loads to the off-peak period. For example, a residential customer, a simple example would be like you moving your laundry, the period that you do your laundry, to an off-peak period where you can enjoy a lower rate. Okay, and that's just one example. There are a lot of other examples that can be used, but the customer has the option to shift certain loads that are shiftable to the period of off-peak, whereby they can take advantage of a lower rate. So it's a twofold benefit. One, when you enter into the off-peak period, you automatically benefit. Or you can shift certain loads from on-peak to off-peak, which will be a further benefit to the customer. This is more, it's done to, we keep on saying in the past to the media that we will do our best to make rates affordable. Now we are aware that most people wants to see the rates lower. We can't speak to that just yet. But then from the IRC's point of view, we would try to keep the rates as affordable as possible. So that measure that we have taken is to do so. So it will ameliorate any impact of any increase because the customer now has a choice to move some of their loads to the off-peak period, which enjoys a lower rate. Next slide. So I think I mentioned in most of those benefits already, but we'll just go over them. So the new rate structure should encourage efficiency improvements and cost reduction on both the demand and supply side. Now for the layman, what we mean by demand and supply side. Supply side would be DOMLEC, demand side would be you, that's utilizing the energy. So the new rate structure would encourage a level of efficiency due to the manner in which it has been designed. And this new approach is to secure financial sustainability of DOMLEC, which is part of the mandate of our act to ensure that DOMLEC is viable, while reducing the cost burden to the customer. And in so doing, we'll also accrue environmental benefits through demand side management and peak load reduction. Next slide. Okay, so we have finally reached the end of our presentation, and now we'd like to invite any questions that the participants would have. Thank you for your listening.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm not an accountant. I'm not an engineer. I'm just stakeholder. Thanks for the presentation. You mentioned I was happy when I heard about the time of use because that's something to ask about. The key parameters that you mentioned. I didn't hear anything about
Yes, yes.
I didn't hear anything about any comparative figures. For instance, whether you touch base with various people in the Caribbean, other utilities in the Caribbean before coming to your final parameters. And of course, we talk about the time of use, which is very important. I'm not sure if I heard anything about the load type, the fluency, and the sensitivity and pollution and the domestic when you talk about it. And of course, one of the considerations I would like to see is, for instance, the comparative figures, I quite rightly said, I would like to hear something about it because in my understanding, what government wants, the revenue, for the spending, the depreciation, and also we have to look at the interest of the consumers. So, yes, that is an area of concern.
Okay, so could I intervene there because I like to take one question at a time. Okay, so with respect to comparative quantities, the documents that will be going to consultation next will have the actual rates for the different categories. And it will also, within that document, will also have comparisons with your current bill and also benchmarking with other Caribbean utilities in terms of the cost for the different customer categories, whereby what they are for different consumption amounts. So in the next step for us is to circulate this document for consultation, and your questions will be answered when you receive it. And you will have, I guess, more questions that when we actually go to consultation. But that information will be coming out soon. Okay, so you will be able to see for yourself what it looks like. Yes, I'm going to your second question.
Although you mentioned also that within 3 years or every 3 years there will be a review.
Yes, that's correct.
What about when the geothermal energy, if it kicks in, and one would expect that the cost of providing or producing electricity would have, I would hope, would reduce drastically. Would there be any quick review? When I say quick review, will there be a review?
Okay, so the
3 years to have it adjusted.
all right, so the free.
Consideration.
Okay, right. So two things. The 3-year review is mainly applicable to DOMLEC. So we look at DOMLEC's revenue and the expenditure in simple terms and see if they can continue in business. So that review is specifically for DOMLEC. However, the geothermal now is considered to be an IPP, and its feed-in tariff is dictated by what we call a purchase power agreement with DOMLEC. Now, the way it is structured, the geothermal, definitely two things. There will be no volatility in the geothermal price over any 1-year period. Okay, so unlike fuel, which changes from month to month, it could go up, it could go down, the geothermal feed-in tariff will be fixed, and it is guided by a separate document. So in terms of reducing the tariff, I wouldn't use the term drastically, but it will definitely reduce the tariff somewhat. So you'll get a reduction from the geothermal, and the reduction will mainly come about from the fact that DOMLEC will be using less fuel. Okay? Now, it must be understood that when the geothermal plant is commissioned, the size is only 10 megawatts. Now, DOMLEC's peak is 18 at this point in time, roughly 18. So, between the geothermal, the hydro, together, we still have a shortfall. So diesel must be utilized to meet that shortfall in the short term until we go, because we are working towards an objective to have all of our electricity production from renewables. Okay? So the 10 megawatt is the start. So we a few years down the road, based on the demand, more investment will be done in geothermal to reach that target. So the more investment that's done in geothermal, hopefully, when we reach 100%, it will only be a geothermal charge and no diesel. That's the point we want to reach. So we are progressively working towards attaining that goal. So yes, there will be a slight reduction in your tariffs when the geothermal comes into it. Yes, we start.
Yeah, first of all, do we know what the average cost, the average rate at all?
The average rate in terms of the formula that was presented, or are you talking about the overall average rate?
Your formula.
Yes, we have an idea, but we are still waiting on DOMLEC to finalize their document.
Okay.
So we prefer not state it and it's not correct. So as I said, the next document that we are going to issue for consultation will have those rates in.
In your studies, did you consider flat rate at all for some categories of customers?
What do you mean a flat rate? You're talking about in addition to the energy rate?
No, let's say for instance, if you go into the data, I'm very sure that that's how we can promote it every month. Just like telecom, you can have a number every day.
No, I don't think that is. No, what I know is that in the standard option for domestic, the rate for the people that use less than 50 kilowatt hours is less, or will be less. So that's to accommodate persons that are at or below what we call the poverty line in economics. So they can afford to use electricity. Yes. I don't know if I can reach out to DOMLEC to speak to that, but no, I think it was considered, but I'm not sure if it wasn't. It didn't. I don't know. I don't know what to say so far. Because at the end of the day, it's like we have to look at whether they are utilizing less than 50. We have to look at how it impacts the utility. Because even if they're using less than 50, they still have to have generators on, they still have to use fuel, they have to use this, they have to use that. And if we have to introduce a flat rate like that, then it would have to be subsidized by other parties within the structure. So DOMLEC can consider that. Okay, all right, no. All right, so from the data collected and mapped, there's a consistent link between more consumption and a lower rate. So I would say yes, and it is hoped that elasticity that you speak about will manifest during the off-peak periods where the rate would be lower. So if people move some of their consumption or a great part of it to the off-peak periods, that would work very well for the utility as well as the customer. Oh, Mr.
Okay, can I sit or should I stand? Okay, let me stand. Right. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. One, the first question is what is the relationship between the WACC and the internal rate of return? Or is there a relationship?
The internal rate of return is another methodology of deriving a return, but as guided by our tariff review document that guide the structure of the rate, we use the weighted average cost of capital because it factors the combination of debt financing and equity financing, and it is something that is used across the industry. So when we compare it with other utilities or other regulators within the market, we found that most of the regulators, even those in the US and in Jamaica and other Caribbean countries, they use the weighted average cost of capital. So yes, the internal rate of return is a methodology, a financial model used to determine the rate of return, but the WACC is also another approach in determining a rate of return to be applied.
Okay. Well, it kind of follows up from another question follows up from the WACC, the cost of capital, and you mentioned the cost of equity, which seems to indicate to me that if I buy some shares in DOMLEC, I am guaranteed a return, but my return will never be zero or less than zero. Is that correct? Would that be a logical conclusion?
Return, but there is no allowable rate of return. It's like people is a guarantee the rate of return, but of course there will be rate of return to be passed on to equity holders as well.
Right. So that's what I was saying. So essentially, I will never get a rate of return that's zero.
No.
Right. Like if I bought in Research or some other company and they don't do well, the rate of return might fall to zero.
Right.
Yeah. But if I buy it in DOMLEC, the rate of return I will get on it will never be zero.
No.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So no, a follow-up question with the geothermal in there and the consumption demand. I think it says our peak demand now is about 18 megawatts.
Yes, right now, yeah, roughly.
Okay. Is there, or did you take into account any possibility of what the demand going to be in the next 5-6 years? Because
yes, we look at the trending of the demand over the period, both the demand, which is KVA, and the energy. Sometimes there are different parameters you have to look at. So we look at demand and we look at energy. So this is what influences what happens in terms of investments in adding more generators to the system and so on. So yes, we look at all of that. And it is tied to the economy of the country. So you're an economist, so as you know, if there's no activity, much activity happening in the economy, then the demand can plateau and it can stay there for a while until economic activity rises. So we have forecasts. We have forecasts of worst case scenario, and we have forecasts for best case scenario. And right now we also have in between. So we are at the lower part of it because the load is not accelerating as fast as we like.
So we expect the economy to go slowly for the next 5 years.
Difficult to say.
No, if you expect it to grow rapidly, then you would be expecting the cost per unit to fall.
Well, yes.
But
Yes.
anyway, okay.
No, it's actually the IPP charge. It's actually IPP, it's not fuel. So, but well, let Connie.
What it includes in terms of what it includes
For the
in
cost of
terms
your
of fuel energy use. In terms of energy use, the fuel surcharge, it takes into consideration the fuel charge will take into consideration a component of fuel used by the generating unit and also the total energy sold from renewable energy. So geothermal is one leg of an additional, the cost associated with additional generation. So therefore, that will be a line factor to increase the associated cost over the total energy energy stored in kilowatt hours. Now, when you have the total energy stored in kilowatt hours, you cannot differentiate whether it is hydro, whether it is geothermal, or whether it is diesel. So that's why the mix of energy is included into the computation.
For the geofuel cost, IPP cost will be separate. Any further questions? Okay, so we don't know. I think that we have exhausted the questions that the participants have. So unless there's any further activities, can you come and, I guess, still adjourn the presentation?
I realized at my back there was some discussions and deliberation. So I will ask again. Are there any other questions or comments that the stakeholders would like to offer? Sure. Mike?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to respond to Mr. Ari's the rate of repair. I think what you'll find, because I was fascinated by what you said, but what you'll find is that utilities, electric utilities, and some of the other utilities have long been considered a safer investment than average company, because they are regulated, and sometimes the regulators would try, as Mr. stated, to make sure that the utility is efficient and that gets a certain rate of return. And Warren Buffett actually had at one time a fair number of utilities in his portfolio for that reason, to help him in this problem. But what you'll find recently, we have sold off a lot of those because we worried about things like climate change and fire, and now the utilities are affected. And we saw what happened with DOMLEC a few years ago with Hurricane Maria. So it is not as safe as it used to be considered. We are never safe. And we DOMLEC didn't get compensated for the Hurricane Maria disaster that happened. So you can see, as an investor, you have to think very carefully of where you're going to put your money. And that's why the regulators have to ensure that the utility gets a clear rate of return, because it's a very difficult thing. More technical question for engineers, but with respect to your diesel generators, is there any thought given to switching the source of fuel from diesel to what we just call cooking oil?
Over the years, there have been a lot of consideration of options to replace diesel. Okay, high HFO was considered, but HFO, there's a lot of handling involved, and it can be messy. But cooking oil, no. I would say HFO, which is the next cheapest form of fuel relative to diesel. So that was considered, but it was never pursued. I do not know all the reasons, but I think there might be modifications to be done to the diesel generators to accommodate that type of fuel. It's an expensive investment. So. To add further to what Mr. Stamp is saying, the first now is to obtain all our energy generated from renewable sources. HFO is not considered renewable, although there are other forms of fuel that they say, we want to move away from all of that.
No, I just want to know whether there is allowance for insurance. DOMLEC is showing themselves. Okay. Go on to the
So we're good. We have exhausted all the questions and comments. I think one of the most significant takeaways from this presentation is that in the new rate structure, we will see the introduction of time of use rates, where you customers will have the opportunity to either benefit from off-peak or on-peak rates. And to note, the peak rate will be higher than the off-peak rate, of course, as a form of benefit to you in the introduction of new rates. So we have come to the end of this presentation. Of course, if you have any further questions or comments, you can use the email address on the screen, as well as admin@ircdominica.org. Our decision documents are available on our website, www.ircdominica.org. So that is all the final decisions that we have made so far in the rate review consultations are available on our website. So I would like to thank you, stakeholders, for being here today, for taking that stake and buying in the rate review process. We'll see you at our next and final consultation, where we will discuss DOMLEC's cost of service study and its rate proposal. Of course, that date will be relayed to you at a later time. Thank you very much. And refreshments, you can entice yourself in a quick refreshment at the back.